Assalamualaikum and welcome to another webinar series of LIT. LIT is Legal Innovation and Technology. We do webinar series twice a month. This is episode 14, and today's topic is going to be about the national budget because that is all we are hearing. That is what everyone's talking about, and actually, it is a very important topic. যে আমাদের পুরা ন্যাশনাল বাজেট এবং যেই সেক্টরে যা চেঞ্জেস আসছে, যে বাজেট অ্যালোকেট করা হচ্ছে, দিস উইল অ্যাকচুয়ালি ডিটারমাইন প্রত্যেকটা সেক্টরে কিভাবে ডেভেলপমেন্টস হবে, ইমপ্রুভমেন্টস হবে এবং আমরা বুঝতে পারি যে গভর্নমেন্টের ফোকাস, এই যে আমরা যে একটা স্মার্ট বাংলাদেশের ভিশনটা দেখছি, আমরাও দেখব যে কোন সেক্টরে the government has given focus and they have increased the budget. In certain areas they have decreased the budget, and why it is so. Why does some sector budgets increase, some sectors budget decrease, and what are the reasonings behind it? এগুলা আমরা একটু শুনবো এবং আজকে আমরা একটু যদি ওভারভিউ বলি on the things that we will be talking about. Actually, একটা specific sector নিয়ে, because shop sector we cannot talk about, and this episode of lit we will focus on the ICT sector, the tech sector, which plays a very crucial role for the reality and the dream that we are all dreaming about smart Bangladesh. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, I am Barrister 𝐔𝐧𝐥𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐠. I'm an advocate of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh with 18 years of experience and expertise in law, technology, and business. I'm very passionate and I heavily advocate for technology driven solutions in legal service. And I have dedicated my current life and future life in closing this the justice gap through tech. And with me, I actually have a very special guest, like all times, and he is. I couldn't think of anybody better to talk to me about this because, to be honest, I am not good with numbers. And the only person I know who's very good with numbers and his job is our guest today. And I cannot wait to learn and hear his views on this particular topic, which is basically, can law and technology boost the economy in Smart Bangladesh for the fiscal year 2024 and 2025's budget? And I want to introduce Cezanne M. Chaudhry. Cezanne, how are you? And thank you for your time and for agreeing to talk to me about this special topic, which has been you have been talking a lot about it. I think on a regular basis, people come to you for advice, and you probably know the ins and out. But we know সব কিছু ব্যাপারে আসলে কথা বলা পসিবল না এক ঘন্টায়, যেখানে we know how many hours and months of has to be given in approving this entire national budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025. We'll talk about one particular sector, and before we start talking about our topic, I want to mention Cezanne M. Chaudhry, why you are an expert in this field, because you are the founding partner of ACE Advisory, which basically is a world class outsourcing and professional service. Your clientele glows. It's you have a global clientele, and I personally can vouch for that. And you do a lot of advising on accounting, taxes, payroll, secretarial services. You do a lot of advisory financial services. You help a lot of companies, global companies who want to do businesses here. You also help local companies to establish businesses abroad. So you have quite a very dynamic work experience and expertise, I want to say. And I was also very happy to see your involvement and your passion towards promoting and supporting the startup and the startup sectors in Bangladesh, which is on the rise, and which you are also an advisor to many of them, and a lot of them come to you because Season, we know, statistics and data shows that, if you have 100 startups, um, 80% of them are going to fail. And a lot of them is basically for compliance issues because they were not aware of it. Maybe the idea was good or the timing was not good for various reasons. But then you get one unicorn out of 100, and that one can basically make up for the economy and the loss that we had of by losing 80 startups. So that is the kind of that is what the data shows. And without in this webinar series, basically I want you to talk more rather than me, because this is your forte. And Season, welcome. And how are you?
I'm great, thank you. And firstly, thank you so much for inviting me on. I've been following the broadcast that you've been doing regularly, and it's been very interesting to watch. And you've touched upon a lot of areas that we overlook in general conversation as well, and highlighting certain points that I think are is required in our stage in the country, and as well as bringing me here to share some of my expertise on this area. So, of course, by profession, I am a chartered accountant, and I practice in taxes a lot. So, of course, the budget that was proposed and soon to be approved is something that we've been working on for the last 4 to 5 months, particularly for this year in particular. We've been involved with the proposals that have gone out from multiple trade bodies, from accounting board associations. So we have given our input for those as well. We've presented the NBR on what we recommend, as well as been part of the discussions forums whereby we've put forward our questions of why something has happened. And one thing I will say is I've been pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't say surprised, but I would definitely appreciate the fact that the forthcomingness of tax authorities in terms of how they have shared very in-depth understanding, as well as their the reason for their propositions as well. So that's been a great clarity giving for us, right? Sorry.
That is really great, and this was also something that I've noticed. এটা কিন্তু প্রত্যেকবারই হয়, বাজেট আসে, বাজেট চলে যায় পেপারে, নিউজ পেপারে, টিভিতে কয়েকটা দেখায়, বাজেট অ্যাপ্রুভড, বাজেট প্রপোজড, বাজেট অ্যাপ্রুভড। এই মাঝখানে মাঝখানে অনেক কিছু হয়। সো before we go, I know we will talk about one particular sector, which we are both very interested in, and I think a lot of people are interested in. But before I go in, can you tell us, and our audience, যারা আসলে আমরা বুঝি না how this whole thing happens, so একটু যদি বলো যে how this has shifted and changed over the years, because I believe like amrao we have also shifted, like digital Bangladesh, then now we're going towards smart Bangladesh. So can you tell us how the authorities have also, এখন তো everything is online, আগে তো এত ওপেনলিও থাকতো না, আমরা জানতামও না কোনটার কি বাজেট, অ্যাপ্রুভ ক্রাশ টাশ হওয়ার পরে হয়তো জানা যেত। So you are right, and এখন it's quite open. The regulatory and the authorities are also welcoming in taking suggestions, engaging experts, consultants, stakeholders, and they actually want it, they want this engagement. Again, everything is to happen in closed doors. So if we go back, it's always nicer to know the history from where we're coming from, then we can
Yeah.
appreciate where we are today. So
Yeah.
if you tell us a little bit, what but just the changes in the last 10, 15 years, from the authorities point of view, when they are you know doing a budget proposal, and আমরা আসলে সবাই বুঝি না যে এটা actually it's very tricky, and it takes, you have to pay really really attention to these details, একটা decimal point, একটা number, একটা column, এদিক
Yeah.
ওদিক হয়ে গেলেই, so these are very very highly important work. And how does this happen? And আমরা তো just একটা number পাই at the end of the day, এই
Yeah.
সেক্টর এত টাকা, এই সেক্টর এত টাকা, and then we start criticizing, which is what most people start doing, কিন্তু এটার পিছে যে কতটুকু লেবার যাচ্ছে, um,
Mhm.
এটা আমরা বুঝি না। So if you can take us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I think it's easy to think of it. Say, imagine your household income, right? So you get a salary, so you have to work a certain way to get a certain salary, and then you're going to spend it over, say, a month before you get your salary again. So how do you allocate costs? So you know that your rental expense is X amount, you spend X on utilities, Y amount on grocery, etc., etc. Now you multiply that by 180 million, right? So that's what the budget for the country looks like, right? So you're basically managing a household of that size, right? And from that side, if you think, taxes are basically your income, right? And us suffering to pay taxes is basically us doing the work, right? So, because of which the country gets paid. And then you allocate how you want to spend. So I think that's a very simplistic way of thinking, obviously. But then how would you actually plan how you spend? Because it's obviously the first step is on the last year, what has happened in the previous year. So from
Yes.
a tax perspective or finance ministry perspective, you have to have the data of what has happened last year. So say our education budget was X amount, we managed to spend 80% of that, which was amount Y, which means if we wanted to grow, we'll probably have to put amount Z into it. So if you think of it simply that, okay, I was in a two-bedroom house, which cost me this much in rent. I want to move to a three-bedroom house, which means I have to pay more rent. So you allocate more amount for your rental expenses. So similar to that, the initial exercise continuously happens within the finance ministry where they are gathering data to see how the expenditure allocations are going, and based on that you have a base amount of how you want to expend for the next year. And then comes the policy issues, right? So say for instance, I want tech to be a priority sector, so I will have more tax expenses there, tax amount spent there, because that is something I want to grow. You have short term versus long term issues, so you want things on expenditures on healthcare and education, which have longer term returns. And then you have more medium term, which is things like training and vocation that's coming in. And then you have the short term ones where you have subsidy on rice or fuel and things like that, right? So you plan it out based on that. Generally around February, that's when the true work behind the budget for this year starts. Around March to April is when invitation for others to come in to give their proposition, trade bodies, unions, things like specialized trade bodies. So if you have, say, more than FDCCI and MCCI, you also have accountants coming in, you have experts in particular areas where they see tech experts coming in, bases going in with their tech recommendations, PACO going in with outsourcing, you know, recommendation. And these are all taken on board. And then what we see is a product of that. So first week of June is when we have a budget that's announced. It's based on inputs from everyone. And then this 1 month period is set aside for adjustments, right? I think in this year we had a particularly extra challenge of certain conditions imposed by the IMF due to our funding, whereby we were forced more to have a accelerated approach towards improving our tax GDP ratio. I think it's important to say that overall, in personal view, it's not that we are a very indebted country. Bangladesh is one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios of any country in this region, and even globally speaking, we're one of the lowest in terms of national debt. However, the tax recovery has always been low. And to give you a history of how the taxes have come about, I'll try to keep it as simple and easy as or be brief as possible, so people don't switch off their viewerships. So we have always been very much dependent on indirect taxation. So by that, it's customs duties and VAT, right? Our income tax from direct sources has always been low, but the rate of taxes, if you go back 20 years, you'll see the corporate tax rates were almost double of what we see at the moment, right? So it's closer to 50 than it is to the 25 that we see now. Over the years, this has come down. We are very close to a regional average, which is around 19%. We've come down to 25%. Our income tax on personal income has started to go up. So that's been the trend. I think there's a lot of discussion on the new 30% bracket, but that is how most economists would see as a fair tax regime, which is progressive in nature. So the more you earn, the higher the incident of tax falls on you. Whereas with indirect taxes, it has an unfair imposition where if I'm making 1 lakh taka, I'm paying 15 taka VAT on my can of Coca-Cola. But even the rickshaw who's earning 20,000 is also paying 15 taka on the can of Coca-Cola, right? So the drive has always been to reduce indirect taxes and increase direct taxes, which is seen as a more fair system of implementation of taxes. And then another area where our indirect taxes are reducing is also the customs duties. So those are being revised as we move from a LDC into a developing country. That requirement is kicking in because once you want to enter into the arena with the big boys, then you can't have such a protectionist regime where your customs duties are at that high level. So the trend has been reduce customs duties, reduce reliability on VAT, increase direct taxes. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening, and that's been the trend of taxes all along over the last 8, 10 years or 20 years, as you say.
I always used to wonder, like, these budgets are allocated for specific sectors, like, education, health, like you rightly pointed out, and we pick, priority wise, যে কোনটাতে এই বছর আমরা ফোকাস দিব, কোনটাতে আমাদের, and we look at the past, আমাদের, what happened in the past, what strategy worked, what strategy failed, um, how to make it right. So we take that as a base. বাট আমরা এখন, আমি আমার আমার মাঝে মাঝে মনে হয় যেরকম, ইনিশিয়ালি যখন যে বললো যে ফেব্রুয়ারি থেকে দে স্টার্ট ওয়ার্কিং, সো ফার্স্ট এই হিটটাকে অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইট কামস ফ্রম দোজ পার্টিকুলার অ্যান্ড ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল মিনিস্ট্রিজ অ্যান্ড সেক্টরস, রাইট? যে um, আমাদের মানে ফার্স্ট, আমার মনে হয় ফার্স্ট হোমওয়ার্কটা একটা ড্রাফট কামস ফ্রম দেম, দেন the authorities sit together যে আচ্ছা এটা হচ্ছে এডুকেশন সেক্টরের ডিমান্ড, এটা হচ্ছে ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল সেক্টরের ডিমান্ড, এটা হচ্ছে আর&ডি সেক্টরের ডিমান্ড, অ্যান্ড এগুলোকে একসাথে নিয়ে বসে let's allocate, and obviously these are the kind of arguments that happens in the cabinet and the parliament, like each will try to, push their agenda, pass an act or a bill or something, and then it has to be voted in. If everybody agrees, it goes forward. If everybody doesn't agree, or the majority, actually the majority is the right way to say it, if the majority doesn't agree, it doesn't go through. And that's a pretty standard, like, process that's being followed all around the world. And আমরা বুঝতেই পারছি যে যেহেতু আমাদের ফোকাস এখন ডিজিটাল বাংলাদেশ থেকে স্মার্ট বাংলাদেশতে আসছে, and আমরা এটা নিয়ে অনেক শুনেছিও during our election campaigns, that there is a lot of work to do, and it's not going to happen overnight. মানে গভর্নমেন্টের কাজ করার সাথে সাথে, I think us as the nationals, as the as the citizens of this country, we also have a role to play. We need to kind of change our mindset, um, with this shift towards digitalization, or like the digital age and the smart Bangladesh. So amadero, we kind of have to be ready to accept things that way, because we are seeing that, there were suggestions that, it should be mandatory, that at the percentage of the government offices should be, working digitally, either a solution based থাকতেই হবে, and কিছু কিছু সেক্টরে it's actually needed, because we all see that, I mean, it's a change that's happening all over the world. মানে অনেক সময় লাগে when you do it manually. যেরকম আমাদের ল্যান্ড was one of those challenging areas, এই জমির এই খতিয়ান, এই রেজিস্ট্রি, এই যে এইসব বিল দেওয়া, খাজনা দেওয়া, uh, was a total nightmare. So it's good that we have realized it, and we are trying to kind of, move towards that and digitalize that for us. I mean, we can now pay our khazanas and khutians through mobile banks, like through your phone, sitting in your office, like sitting at your home. So that is awesome. um, and আমরা obviously কিছু জিনিস আমাদের যেহেতু, you also rightly mentioned that আমরা এলডিসি দিকে যাব, but actually we are still not there yet. A huge number of our population are still unemployed. We have a certain percentage of people who are below poverty level, and the basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, এগুলা নিয়েও এখনো there is a certain percentage. I will not say it's a very high, but we still have a chunk of our population who are below that, who are still struggling for their 3 meals. They're still struggling to find, a roof on their head, to find basic clothing. সো আমরা আসলে যেটা বললাম যে অনেক সেক্টর আছে। আমরা সবকিছু in 1 hour we will not be able to cover. But basically, I want to pick your brain on this particular sector where, which is going to be making a huge impact in the coming years, and which has been really been talked about a lot. And that is the information and communication sector, the ICT sector. So আমরা যেটা দেখেছি, the ICT sector allocation was টাকা 2,872 crore in the 2024-2025 budget, which is 21% higher than the previous year if we take that as a benchmark, which was basically 2,368 crore. And is there a scope to revise এগুলো কি একবার হওয়ার পর আবার রিভাইজ হতে পারে if somebody kind of puts it that it's very low, and if there's a very valid reason, maybe something missed out and it needs to be increased, does that happen?
Of course, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. So there is always fine tuning. So, for instance, in the number that you quoted, in the previous year, due to IT exemption on ITA's activities, there was almost a 1,500 crore impact on taxes, the tax exemption on IT. As per NBR record, was 1,500 crores. So that's another tax expense that essentially is part of the expenditure that's going into IT by the government, right? So it's not what you're just spending on it, but what you're also not earning from it is part of that expense. And so these things happen. So if the IT exemption was removed, your budget would, their amount would essentially decrease by this amount, right? So it happens all the time that adjustment takes place. But I would say, by and large, it from a holistic perspective, if you look at it from an outsider, there really isn't much of a change. Given how big the numbers are, if you change 100 crore up or down, on the overall budget in a national perspective, it doesn't have much of an impact, right? So I would say that yes, minor adjustments keep happening because this is built up of many, many small numbers that have come together to add up to the 2,100 crore that you just said. So
That's actually good that we are flexible like that. If we would have been rigid, that would have been a problem, and which is what I actually truly believe as well. For me, who's not a chartered accountant or an expert, but আমার কাছে যেটা মনে হচ্ছে that the national budget for 2024-2025 actually shows it looks promising. And কিন্তু আমার যেটা মনে হচ্ছে যে there has to be একটা continuous একটা policy and innovation and adoption একটা আমাদের দেখে থাকতে হবে, because we know tech sector moves really fast. And
yeah,
আমরা যেটা বাজেট করেছি, for example, আমি যদি বলি যে ধরো we did a budget on, like, we'll do this much of R&D on AI, and in a year it's gone. There's a new technology, like, so but I'm like, oh no, এটা বাজেটে we decided to do in this technology, we have to stick with this technology. But however, that technology has become redundant, and we don't know, and actually we cannot predict this because technology is moving so fast. What's trending today might not be trending in 6 months.
yeah,
So what I believe, একটা কি জিনিস আমাদের মাথায় রাখতে হবে যে we need to be agile in that way so that we can make that shift, as long as our principles and our goals and objectives remain the same, which is basically development of our ICT sector, digitalization of this country and the government services. And আরো কয়েকটা জিনিস আছে যে ডিজিটাল লিটারেসি, বিল্ডিং রিসোর্সেস, এই জিনিসগুলা যেন আমরা promoting innovation,
Yeah.
because if we don't have innovation now, it will not be possible for যে আমরা বাইরে থেকে কত নিয়ে আসতে পারি. So we
So
kind of have to build our own resources so that we are not dependent or on a third party or another country to give us these essential services, because what it seems like eventually these will all become basic services. আমরা আজকাল বাজারও করতে যাই না,
yeah, of
আমরা
course.
বাসায় বসে বাজার করি. আমরা এখন মানে বাসের টিকিট লাইনে ধরেও দাঁড়ায় কিনি না, আমরা ফোন থেকে আমরা বাসের টিকিট কিনি, ট্রেনের টিকিট কিনি, প্লেনের টিকিট কিনি. আগে যেতে হতো এয়ারলাইন্সের অফিসে, like
Yeah.
we pay our bills sitting at home. Nobody goes to banks anymore. So এই জিনিসগুলাতে আমাদের, even like education was one sector. I think we allocated 1.1 billion in the education sector. And I think the components of the education sector, a big chunk of it is basically digital literacy, uh, which should start from an early age, because I think that is what COVID has taught us, that we should be prepared for everything. And এখন অনেক কিছু actually remote চলে যাচ্ছে, like remote office, remote learning. অনেক schools বাচ্চারাও এখন remotely class করেছে. um, they had to adjust during COVID times. So আমাদের এই যে বাচ্চাদেরকেও যদি আমি এই এডুকেশন সেক্টরের মধ্যে আনতে চাই, তাদেরকেও কিন্তু কিছু বেসিক ডিজিটাল লিটারেসি লাগবে. হাউ টু টার্ন অন আ ল্যাপটপ, আ ডেস্কটপ, একটা ট্যাবলেট কিভাবে চালাতে হবে, বিকজ just going on the web is not, and connecting online is not enough. আমরা যেরকম জানি যে with great powers come great responsibilities. So the more you're staying connected online, yeah, I'm talking to you right now, যেটা হয়তো আগে পসিবল হতো না, but then again I am connected online. এখান থেকে এখন একটা ভাইরাস আসতে পারে, একটা সাইবার অ্যাটাক হতে পারে, so many things can happen, like with this, the risk, like the privacy issues, the rise of in cyber crime. When all
Yeah.
crimes are somehow linked with cyber crimes these days. So
Absolutely.
these things, we have to kind of make sure that when we are investing in this sector, we also build ourselves in such a way so that our cyber security standard is the global standard. And আমরা কয়েকদিন ধরেই, বেশ কয়েকদিন দেখি আমরা নিউজ পেপারে ন্যাশনাল আইডি নাম্বার লিক হয়ে গেছে, ব্যাংকের এই আইডি গুলো চলে গেছে. So the problem as a legal professional, what I see is like, হ্যাঁ আমরা বুঝছি যে this is a cyber crime, but how do you determine the damages? হ্যাঁ, আমার অফিসের 100 এমপ্লয়ির ডেটা, ফোন নাম্বার নিয়ে গেছে, তোমার কত টাকা লস হয়েছে? How do you determine that?
Yes.
My email account got hacked, my website was hacked. So how many customers did you lose? It's hard to determine. So জিনিসগুলো এগুলা, I know এগুলা eventually develop করবে, but these are the challenges that when we are investing in our infrastructure in the ICT sector, these are the areas that you kind of emphasize. What are your take on this? Like, because আমরা ICT sector একটা amount জানতে পারলাম যে হ্যাঁ, it's
Right.
important, because and it is aligned with our goals and the vision and the mission of Smart Bangladesh, smart economy, smart citizen. এটার জন্য আমাদের ICT সেক্টরের দরকার heavy investment. Um, but what do you think should be considered? Because ICT sector though is huge, and honestly, I think every sector is IT sector,
Yeah.
because even at a small entrepreneur who runs half her business from a Facebook page, আমি ফেসবুকে একটা জিনিস অর্ডার করলাম, তারপরে আমি তাকে নাম্বার দিলাম, আমি তারপরে তাকে আমার বাসায় ডেলিভারি, হয়তো তাকে ক্যাশ অন ডেলিভারি করছি, কিন্তু এই যে আমার এই যে ডেটাটা চলে যাচ্ছে, আমার ফোন নাম্বার চলে যাচ্ছে, আমার বাসার অ্যাড্রেস চলে যাচ্ছে, সো এই জিনিসগুলোও যেন আমার সেফ থাকে, প্রোটেক্টেড থাকে, বিকজ আমাদের কনস্টিটিউশন আমাদেরকে গ্যারান্টি দেয় দ্যাট উই হ্যাভ টু প্রোটেক্ট আওয়ার প্রাইভেসি। সো এই জিনিসগুলো নিয়ে আসলে আমাদের অনেকটা অ্যাওয়ারনেস অ্যান্ড আমার লাইক আই সেড ইটস জাস্ট নট দ্য গভর্নমেন্ট অথরিটিস, I think the companies and us as citizens, as
Yeah.
Indians, also have a role to play. যে আমরা এখন যাকে তাকে আমার ফোন নাম্বার সবাইকে আমি দিয়ে বেড়াবো। I will make sure my privacy, my phone are in order so that it's not easy to hack. আমি একটা পাসওয়ার্ড আমি ঠিকভাবে রাখবো। আমি আমার পিন শেয়ার করব না কারোর সাথে, বিকজ দিস আর হোয়াট মানুষ
Mhm.
আজকাল এখন এগুলো চায়। কেউ আর অন্য কিছু চুরি করে না। মানুষ পাসওয়ার্ড চুরি করে, পিন নাম্বার চুরি করে, ইমেল অ্যাড্রেস। সো দিস হ্যাজ বিকাম দ্য এই ডিজিটাল অ্যান্ড স্মার্ট বাংলাদেশ হওয়ার এখন wanted to know from you is, like I said, ICT সেক্টরটা তো আমরা অনেক হিউজ। সো
Mhm.
what do you think? Actually, I'm তোমাকে কয়েকটা কোয়েশ্চেনই করব, বাট ফার্স্টলি I want to ask, like, what do you think their focus areas have been and why? Like ICT sector, they did some segregations and part by part. So what are those, and why do you think this fits, and why do you think they did it?
Okay. So if you talk from a very much from a budget aspect of it and what has been put into the IT sector, the biggest debate around it has been, should we tax this sector, whether there's a tax exemption that's necessary. There's been a big talking point. This has lasted, and this was supposed to end this year. Now the reason, as you mentioned in part of that in your discussion, was that the agility of the government to change things as the need arises. And that need has arisen mainly from the fact that new technology and AI and machine learning has come in. So the expectation had been that Bangladesh IT sector would come to a point where it would be self-sufficient. If it's making profits, then it could be taxed and would be a source of revenue for the government. But in an international stage, we are unfortunate to say, but we are quite a way behind other countries. And our primary, in terms of, if we say from an export perspective, our revenue from the IT sector is very much based on low IT skill level work, right? So that has always been the case, whether it's making cute clothes in the RNG sector to making low end, low tech driven products and programming. So something that India has been doing since the 1990s. We kind of had an expectation the natural evolve process would have Bangladesh taking up those lower end tech work and being a global sort of a sales point for low end tech services. But you see, with the artificial intelligence coming in, these jobs will actually become obsolete. These industries will no longer exist. You don't need someone to edit images anymore for an ad campaign, right? So we have thousands of people employed in Bangladesh who are in graphics work, who are editing images. A simple AI website does that for you now. Maybe not to the point where which an Adidas or Nike advert would use, but it's only a matter of time before that happens. So that's certainly an area where our tech sector will become less competitive globally, and that's been a reason why this respite has been given to the tech firms, that you have exemption for a longer period of time so you can reinvest and train your people to actually be good enough to compete at a global level in terms of creating the AI products required to service the local demand as well as internationally be competitive as an IT hub of services that can be sent out. So that's a big factor. And secondly, you mentioned IT literacy. Yes, we as a relatively young country in terms of population, tech adaptive adoption has been very quick. People are very quick to take on. So this is probably a country where we skipped a bank account and we moved directly to Bcash and mobile finance, right? So we went from cash to mobile finance, which took the Western world 200 years to do, and we
Digital
went yeah, we just skipped that step entirely. Don't need a bank account, don't need checkbooks. Let's just go to mobile finance, right? So we have been good at that. So tech adoption is quick. However, we don't have, I mean, of course, I don't know the details of it entirely, but the training of people at higher end tech, right? So as you said, with startups, you only need one that can cover the loss of 100, right? Similarly, you need to focus on training those 500 individuals who are adept at skills needed at that level instead of having 5 lakh people who can turn on a computer, right? So that's probably something focus and agility we can drive upon and actually develop those resources. But you also mentioned the startup community in Bangladesh and the fact that we have a very innovative uh, populations, honestly. I mean, if you look at Bangladesh, the number of entrepreneurs as a percentage of the population is immensely high. Even a rickshaw rider is essentially, a rickshaw driver is an entrepreneur, right? And then if I have a salaried driver, once he's worked for 20 years, he wants to go back to his village and open up a shop. So that entrepreneurial drive within the people of Bangladesh is immense compared to anywhere else in the world. So that is something that can be nurtured, and tech allows that. This tech facilitates entrepreneurship, taking a step forward. Like F-commerce, there's so many young individuals who have taken up F-commerce and set up shops because the cost is low. You don't need to take a shop. You don't need to have, you know, paint a
Warehouse
yeah,
employees.
and you don't have to advertise on a newspaper. You just boost it on Facebook. So it's become so much easier with technology coming in to push these entrepreneurs to go forward. So again, there is no alternative to tech adaptation and bringing in that tech, but we need to train ourselves in-house so that we're not dependent on the rest of the world for the tech, right? So F-commerce, yes, it generates internal revenue, but at the end of the day, a bulk of the amount is going to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta. So we want to see Bangladeshi entrepreneurs come up with products which is actually a replacement for a foreign dependency, and we can have the right trained up people coming up with products locally.
এই যে এখানে যে আমাদের ডেভেলপমেন্টস গুলো আসছে, সো আমাদেরকে একটু চ্যালেঞ্জেস এন্ড রিস্কস গুলা আইডেন্টিফাই করে উই হ্যাভ টু মুভ ফরওয়ার্ড। উই ক্যানট জাস্ট মুভ ফরওয়ার্ড থিঙ্কিং কোনো বাধা আসবে না, কোনো চ্যালেঞ্জেস আসবে না, দিস ইজ দ্য স্ট্রেট পাথ। ইট ডাজন্ট ওয়ার্ক লাইক দ্যাট। অ্যান্ড যেটা বললাম যে আমরা আসলে যে digital marketing, e-commerce, f-commerce, and there are few other commerce. Okay, so these are all based on social media marketing. কেউ এখন কারো মার্কেটিং স্ট্র্যাটেজি ইজ নট আগের মতন ওই টিভি কমার্শিয়াল ওরকম এখন কম হয়ে গেছে। উই আর অল ফোকাসড অন সোশ্যাল মিডিয়া, রিলস, ইউটিউব শর্টস অ্যান্ড অল দিস। অ্যান্ড এগুলো সব করতে হচ্ছে ফেসবুকের মাধ্যমে। হ্যাঁ, অ্যান্ড ফেসবুকের কোনো অফিস নেই বাংলাদেশে। অল দিস মানি ইজ গোয়িং আউট। অ্যান্ড এগেন ফেসবুক নাই কেন, আসবে না কেন? বিকজ they're generating so much revenue from our country. ওরা কেন আসবে না? এগেন এই যে রিস্ক গুলো ওরা দেখে, এই যে আমাদের একটা ডেটা প্রোটেকশন অ্যাক্ট নাই, হ্যাঁ, আমাদের কোনো প্রাইভেসি অ্যাক্ট নাই, আমাদের সাইবার সিকিউরিটি অ্যাক্ট যেটা আছে, ইট ইজ উই আর আ লট অফ পিপল আর নট শিওর। এই যেটা বললাম যে এখন ওর যদি ফেসবুকের কোনো ডেটা ব্রিচ হয়, কোনো সাইবার সিকিউরিটি ব্রিচ হয়, how how is he how are they going to claim damages and who's going to pay them? So they also know যে এটা মানে it's a bit risky for them at this point in time, but which is why we have to kind of develop ourselves to go to that standard, so that যেরকম ফেসবুক সব দেশে গিয়ে তাদের নিজেদের লোকাল অফিস খুলছে, ওরকম লোকাল অফিস আমাদের এখানেও খুলবে, সো দ্যাট ওয়ে আমাদের টাকাটা আমাদের দেশেই থাকবে। এবং সিমিলারলি যেটা তোমরা, ইটস সো রাইট, ইন্ডিয়া হ্যাজ অলওয়েজ বিন, ও মাই গড, মানে আমাদের ঠিক নেইবারিং কান্ট্রি, বাট there's many areas where I feel like we're 10-15 years behind. মানে ইউএস থেকে তো আমি বুঝলাম যে আই এম বিহাইন্ড, বাট এটা তোমার পাশের দেশ, ওদের কিভাবে এত আগায় গেল and আমরা কেন এত দেরিতে আমরা এগুলো রিয়েলাইজ করলাম? ইন্ডিয়া কিন্তু অনেক আগে থেকে এই আইসিটি সেক্টরের দিকে ফোকাস, ওদের এই যে ব্যাঙ্গালোর, বেঙ্গালুরু,
Yeah,
মানে we see CEOs, Indian CEOs taking over Silicon Valley now,
Mhm.
Twitter, Google, you name it. So
Yeah.
like even when I was in the valley, like all my neighbors who were there, they were all tech people working either at PayPal, Apple, মানে so but আমাদের আমরাও হচ্ছি, but like I said, we're just literally like 10-15 years behind. But আমার আরেকটা জিনিস যেটা মনে হয় যে আমাদের এই রিসোর্সেস বিল্ডিং এ যে আমরা পরের দিকে গিয়ে করতে চাই, হ্যাঁ, যে ফর এক্সাম্পল একটা বেসিক কম্পিউটার সায়েন্স, একটা সাইবার ল আর সাইবার সিকিউরিটির একটা কোর্স যদি একটা আন্ডারগ্র্যাড লেভেলে কোথাও পড়ায়, um, the syllabus should be uniform all
Yeah.
over, public and private. সবার there should be a same একটা ইউনিফর্ম সিলেবাস থাকবে, যে এগুলা তুমি এখন আমি এটাকে প্রাইমারি স্কুলে ঢুকাবো। যেরকম আজকাল কিন্তু অ্যাকচুয়ালি প্রাইমারি কিছু প্রাইভেট স্কুলস ইন বাংলাদেশ প্রাইমারি প্রাইমারি বাচ্চাদেরকে প্রাইমারি সেকশনে যারা পড়ছে তাদেরকে আইসিটি দিচ্ছে, লাইক মাই সান ইজ গ্রেড 4 নাও, বাট ক্লাস 3 তে হি হ্যাড আ ক্লাস, আইসিটি ক্লাস। So we have to kind of start from there, with that and then move forward. And আরেকটা জিনিস আমাদের শুনতে হয় যে এই যে যারা এই যে যেহেতু we cannot offer this high quality education, যেটা বললাম যে কম্পিউটার সাইবার ল এর একটা কোর্সই ধরো আর সাইবার সিকিউরিটির একটা কোর্স এক একটা ইউনিভার্সিটিতে এক এক রকম,
Yeah.
কোনটা ভালো কোনটা ভালো না উই ডোন্ট নো। সো পিপল তখন মানুষ করে কি আমি বিদেশে চলে যাই পড়তে, বিদেশে যখন চলে যায় পড়তে তখন ওরা ওখানেই রয়ে যায় বিকজ দে ফিল লাইক অপরচুনিটি ইজ বেটার। সো এটা কিন্তু আমাদের দেশের জন্য একটা একটা জিনিস যে আমরা আসলে ওদেরকে ওই স্যালারিটা এক্সপেক্ট করে দিতে পারি না, ওদেরকে ওই ট্রেনিং কিংবা এডুকেশনটা দিতে পারি না, যে এবং যারা পারে তারা দে প্রেফার ইট যে আমরা বাইরে চলে যাই, যে বাইরে গিয়ে পড়াশোনা করি, বাইরে চান্সটা পাই। সো আমরা আসলে উই লুজ আউট, বাট দেন এগেন দ্যাটস অলসো নট ট্রু, সাম পিপল কাম ব্যাক, পিপল লাইক মি, they come back, a lot of them come back, and I have seen it's growing in numbers. And একটার সাথে আমাদের অনেক কিছু যেরকম আইসিটি সেক্টরের সাথে, লাইক আই সেড এভরি সেক্টর ইজ সামহাউ আইটি সেক্টর নাও, হ্যাঁ, আইটি সেক্টরের সাথে সবকিছু এখন লিঙ্কড, এমন কোনো সেক্টর নাই দ্যাট ইজ নট কানেক্টেড ডিজিটালি। ব্যাংকিং সেক্টর থেকে বলো, আরএমজি সেক্টর থেকে বলো, এডুকেশন সেক্টর বলো, এভরি আইসিটি has touched upon every sector. এখন আমাদের একটা one of the biggest reasons has been for this is the high speed internet.
Yes. High speed
আমাদের
cheap internet. Yeah.
আমাদের ইন্টারনেট হাই স্পিড, ওকে ফাইন, হাই স্পিড না, বাট
And
4G,
cheap. And
4G.
cheap. I mean, in any standard anywhere in the world, Bangladesh has very cheap internet. I don't think
Yes,
anyone.
very cheap internet. We have very, thanks to China, we have very cheap smartphones available, and which has made this accessible to, like, everybody. ইভেন
Yeah.
যেটা বলছিল যে রিক্সাওয়ালা সবাই, মুদির দোকানওয়ালা থেকে শুরু করে সবার হাতে একটা ফোন, সবাই ইউটিউব দেখে, সবাই টিকটক দেখে, সবাই মোবাইলে পেমেন্ট করে, পেমেন্ট রিসিভ করে। সো দিস আর অল গুড থিংস। এবং আমার যেটা মনে হচ্ছে যে আমাদের কি এইবার এই আইসিটি সেক্টরের মধ্যে আম, এই যে এই ডিজিটাল ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার, মানে আমরা যদি এখন আইসিটি সেক্টরকে ফোকাস দিই, সো আমাদের তো ইন্টারনেট ব্যান্ডউইথ এটাকেও ম্যানেজ করতে, বিকজ দেয়ার উইল বি মোর পিপল অন দি ইন্টারনেট, there will be more people online। এখন কেউ আর বাসা থেকেই বার হবে না, ক্লাসও করবে বাসায়, কাজও করবে বাসায়, বাজারও করবে বাসা থেকে, খাওয়াও অর্ডার করবে বাসা থেকে। সো ইউ নিড ইন্টারনেট ফর অল দ্যাট। সো এবং আমরা জানি এটা আমাদের আগে হতো যে এই স্পিড কমে যায় বেশি মানুষ ইউজ করলে, হ্যাঁ।
Yeah.
আহ,
But I think from a national perspective, that's not much. That is because the tech and the sort of infrastructure behind it in Bangladesh is quite well developed. So from greater usage, the slowing down of internet per se, I don't think that's much of a concern at the moment in the country, because from a data driven perspective, most of the implementation of tech has been to the point where you have video streaming, right? And as long as you can cover that, pretty much everything else can work behind it. So if you're using a Bcash app, there's not really much internet that you need to use up for that. So it's still very feasible in terms of what internet is being used for at the moment, at least in the foreseeable future. By that I mean next 2 to 5 years. But again, you mentioned India being ahead of us in this IT field, and we following kind of behind them. Uh, that's a big reason for that is people coming back, right? So you go to Silicon Valley, you'll and if you go to Bangalore, half the mid to top execs have been to Silicon Valley, worked, and come back. How many, apart from, as you said yourself, and maybe a handful of others who have actually worked outside, gained expertise, come back to Bangladesh? That in Bangladesh is very few. And even in terms of expats working in the valley, uh, the Indian community feelings are much stronger. So if you have one person in a role, he will try to make sure his entire team from India goes and gets a job over there. They get trained up and then come back in India and set up. In Bangladesh, we are less inclined in terms of helping each other, especially when it comes to the sort of sector that we're discussing. That if I'm in the valley and I'm a position to hire more Bangladeshis, will I or will I not hire? Right. So, compared to India, we're far behind on that perspective. And in terms of the use of internet in Bangladesh as well, there is still a lot of, as you said, gaps in regulation in terms of how secure I am online. I'll just give you a little example. For instance, we used to, in my firm Ace Advisory, we used to do payroll outsourcing for a UK company. They had about 2,000 headcount, and we used to do it out of Bangladesh because it was so much cheaper. And the use of technology has actually made us sitting in Bangladesh, we were able to deliver services globally because of the IT infrastructure we had, and because of the fact that our labor is much cheaper, so we're much more efficient in terms of outsourcing to or offshoring to Bangladesh, as we call it. But their regulation changed. Their GDPR came in, and they were not allowed to send out personal data to the Bangladeshi server where we could use it and get back to them with output, right? So we lost a client because of that. But in Bangladesh, uh, do we have regulations that everyone knows in terms of what personal data they are allowed to share and not share? So I do payroll processing, for instance, right? And there's very few companies who are aware of how much data they can give me to process the information, right? So of course, from our software,
বোঝানো যায় না যে what's the metadata when you're sharing
yeah,
um,
absolutely. So
information.
from our end, of course, our software that we use is internally developed. I have a tech company, ATL HR, and it's ISO certified, and we have tier 4 servers in use in terms of security. But the person sharing the data with me, how much do they know in terms of what should be shared, what should not be shared? Because this is the employee personal information that they've given to the employer, right? Binded by contract. Whether my contract with them is in line with that or not, there's no one to check, right? So we, as proactively, we have gone and got a legal vetting in terms of whether these agreements that we have in place is appropriate for both sides, right? So the information we're taking, what we need to do with it is compliant with the regulation in Bangladesh as it stands. So, but how many people are doing that? How many people are actually bothered about, okay, I'm taking too much information. Is this a problem? Do I need this particular personal information that I have? How valuable is it? The answer is that it is intensely valuable because if anyone wants to steal from me, they need digital data to steal. If they come to my house, they'll get nothing. There's no, they will not have cash in the house, or if they okay, maybe I have a television. That's the most expensive thing in the house, right? But if you can hack into my life digitally, you
Laptop.
have a lot more, right? So like you said with laptop, for instance, because regulation is so difficult that we actually have things on cloud drives instead of our employees' laptops. So that in the case of a laptop being stolen, I just have to disconnect that particular laptop, and there is no data within the laptop itself. Uh, Say, for instance, there was an instance where they had data and the laptop was stolen. How do I perceive a case that data from that laptop was used to do something? Right? So we have that regulation around, okay, the laptop is stolen. What's the crime and punishment for that? But when the data from the laptop is stolen, what happens? We're completely in the dark. So as you said, that regulation needs to Yeah,
Okay,
it used to.
damages. What? How much did you suffer? How much loss did you have because of the loss of the data from the
Absolutely.
laptop? এগুলা quantifiable, quantify করাটা is a challenge.
It is a challenge, but then universally it's a challenge, right? But other developed countries have that structure in place and legal precedents, to be honest, of such cases that have happened that gives you the interpretation of the law as it should be, right? And of course, this takes time, I'm sure, and it will evolve as things go forward. You touched upon cybercrime and how much international connectivity does Bangladesh have, because cybercrime doesn't have geographical borders. So you don't need to sit in Bangladesh to hack my account. You can hack
Yeah,
me, you can do it from Nepal. Does the person in Nepal get punished for doing that to me? I don't know. Honestly, I'm ignorant on that fact, but I would think that there would be very little legal recourse for me if someone did something to me on the cyber world from sitting in Nepal or Hong Kong or wherever, right? So these clarifications you said, of course, is needed. In terms of computer literacy, you touched upon primary schools having that access, and I think by and large over the last 10, I'll say at least in the last 10 years, there's been huge progress there,
yes,
right?
that's true.
So in terms of institutional training as well, there has been tremendous amount of investment from the government. I personally know of training providers who were paid by the government to carry out these trainings, right? So you would have a specific syllabus in terms of what needs to be trained, how many hours they need to spend on it, and what the output of it is, together with the incentive that if the people qualifying from these training institutions get a job, there's additional benefit from the government. So yes, there are a lot of steps that have been taken, and of course, this continue to be taken as well. Uh, but we need to speed up as well, because how we had foreseen tech development to take place globally in the last events of the last 2 or 3 years have meant that we really need to get our act together and speed up how we move forward.
Thank you, Susan. And I think you have, it is, I agree with you. We have seen a lot of developments. We cannot just say that কোনো change হয় নাই. I think one of the reasons is এই যে দেশে ফেরত আসা নিয়ে বাইরে যারা যায়. I think this is kind of the right time টু বি ইন বাংলাদেশ যারা আছে বাইরে। এবং ইন্ডিয়াতে যেটা হয়েছে যে ওরা যখন ফেরত আসা শুরু করেছে, বিকজ দে অলরেডি নিউ দ্যাট ওরা ফেরত এসে দে হ্যাভ আ মার্কেট, দের ইজ আ ডিম্যান্ড for these kind of tech driven businesses, solutions and services, and there was a demand for it. So it made sense for them to come back and start off, because the demand was already created, the market already existed. এখন আমাদের যেটা হচ্ছে যে the market create হচ্ছে, ডিমান্ড হচ্ছে, and আমরা এখনো ওই ইকুইলিব্রিয়ামের মধ্যে পৌঁছাতে পারি নাই। মার্কেট সাপ্লাই অ্যান্ড মার্কেট ডিমান্ড অ্যান্ড সাপ্লাইয়ের মধ্যে we are somewhere here trying to figure out, to find how to find the right equilibrium. And I think আমাদের টাইমও অনেক শেষ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। আমি আর বেশি কিছু না বলে, I want to kind of tell you that আমাদের এই যে ডিজিটাল ট্রান্সফরমেশন যেটা আছে আমাদের, আমরা যদি এই ট্রান্সফরমেশনে ফোকাস করতে যাই, আমরা কয়েকটা কথা বললাম যে এডুকেশন, স্কিল, দেন এই যে আমাদের আরেকটা রেগুলেটর যেটা আছে যে যারা আমাদের জন্য ডেটা, এই যে ইন্টারনেট, বিটিআরসি, আইসিটি মিনিস্ট্রি, পোস্ট অ্যান্ড টেলিকমিউনিকেশন, দিস লাইক এখন আমি যেটা দেখছি যে ইটস জাস্ট নট, the government cannot do it alone. It's easy to blame the government, but government cannot do it alone, and even the legal sector, huh? They all need to kind of work together and collaborate if we want to really make the smart Bangladesh vision and to become a reality. um, like I said, we discussed, like there are some challenges. We have to kind of law, appropriate law, appropriate regulations needs to be in place. The authorities need to be more active and vigilant, and be one step ahead of these cyber criminals, one step ahead. And then, digital literacy is going to be one area where we want to focus on. And the change of mindset we have to focus on, and we have to continuously promote um, you know uh, innovation. We have to invest in R&D, which is something I don't remember uh, any local companies actually having an R&D team or a department. But Bidec, most of the companies who actually create develop a product or something, they have their own R&D team, and they actually keep a budget for it because they want to improve and continuously grow, because they know what for example, pharmaceutical in the sector যদি ধরি, সব pharmaceutical sector, they have like একটা R&D, R&D একটা সেক্টর থাকে। বিকজ একটা ওষুধ আমি এখন একটা কিওর বানাই ফেলছি, দিস ইজ ইট, এটা অল লাইফ লং লিড করবে, নো। মানে ইউ হ্যাভ টু বি রেডি টু চেঞ্জ, টু অ্যাডাপ্ট অ্যান্ড বি agile, বিকজ পিপল উইল চেঞ্জ, ডিমান্ড উইল চেঞ্জ, সিচুয়েশন উইল চেঞ্জ। এখন আমাদের যেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা একটু স্লোলি আগাচ্ছি, বাট maybe it's not that bad right now, because um, we are a bit behind from other countries, that's true, but maybe we can learn from them. That's how I want to look at it. যে হ্যাঁ, আমরা বাংলাদেশ একটু অন্যান্য দেশের থেকে পিছিয়ে আছি ডিজিটাল ট্রান্সফরমেশনে or ইনোভেশনের দিকে, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. uh, Maybe they made mistakes, we learn from them, we don't do that. যেগুলা হয়তো বেস্ট প্র্যাকটিসেস অলরেডি আছে, established and guaranteed success, we follow those and
Yeah,
implement.
and I'll just add to that. I mean, yes, we are behind a lot of countries, but then we're also ahead of a lot of countries. And a lot of the credit has to be given where it's due, right?
That's
So
true.
I was recently in a conversation with a tax second secretary of taxes. He's in the policy section. So he was telling me that you always talk about how tax rates are going up and people are going to suffer because the taxes are higher. But why don't people pay taxes? Why can't people see this as part of their income? So if I'm going to earn 10, 100 taka and then 10 taka is in taxes, I need to keep that in mind that I'm earning 90. The rest is going to go in taxes. But why am I in this mindset that how do I save that 10 and not give it? Until that mentality change is very difficult for it. It's a chicken egg situation. So the government, if it doesn't get money, it can't spend on you. And if you're not going to give taxes, how will it get the money to spend on you, right? So one has to take the first step. And in every country in the world over history, it has been the taxpayer who pays first and then gets the service, right? And secondly, in terms of where we have actually gone ahead, and because I'm a finance guy from the tax world, digitization of money in Bangladesh and how we have moved into using Bcash and Nogod and bank transfers, this has purely been done through tax, right? So the objective has been to break it a cashless society, and there has been incentives throughout for the last 5 years. If your tax rate is 2.5% lower if you're a cashless company, your salaries are disallowed if you pay in cash, so you have that incentive to pay through a bank transfer, so you legitimize the money, bringing into the system that is tax paid and white, get the informal economy to go smaller, and more comes into the formal economy, which is recognized as GDP, right? So these steps have been happening all in the background, one or two step at a time, and a lot of it we take for granted at the moment, but it's taken policy to come to where it is. Application of policy and what actually gets implemented, there will always be inefficiencies like in any other country in the world. But in terms of moving forward, you're right. A lot of it has to come from individuals, from the private sector. We can't just sit back and say, "Oh, the government will make everything perfect." It hasn't in any country or any world. The USA in its advanced stage still has Mark Zuckerberg come up and say sorry to people because social media was not well regulated in terms of damaging young people, and he had to do that. But you have all the smartest people in the world sitting in those congressional hearings, but they're not coming up with a solution either, right? So it is a collaborative process, and of course, everyone has to learn from each other before steps can be taken. But the first and foremost is the awareness that this is needed, and I think that is the first driving step in terms of bringing about the policy requirements and identification of what needs to be done. But again, as you said, that yes, we are behind on a few steps, but I think we should take that as a with a pinch of salt that we could have gone either way. We have the demographic assets still for us. We have a young population. We have, and then, as you said, even a low income person is spending money to get their internet connectivity, to use tech products to make their lives better. We have tremendous entrepreneurs. As you said, everything is IT driven, even agriculture. So now you have
Yes.
development where you can subscribe and you get weather update, or you can get আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং অফ ওয়েন ইউ নিড টু ধান কখন কেটে ফেলতে হবে ওটারও ওয়ার্নিং আসতেছে যে or কখন ফার্টিলাইজার দিতে হবে, কখন কি ধরনের পেস্ট আসতেছে যেটার জন্য পেস্টিসাইড দিতে হবে, what's the right thing. You're getting it over SMS. Farmers are getting it over SMS, right? And if you think about it, even from when should I pick mangoes from the tree, I can just call up someone and find out what the rate is in the market. Should I take it to market today or
ভিডিও
should I
কল
take it
করে
tomorrow?
সব দেখে দিতে পারছি আমি এখানে বসে ভিডিও কলে আমার আমার
হ্যাঁ, বসে আম বাগান
কি
কিনছি,
হচ্ছে,
ঠিক না?
বাগানে
Right.
কি হচ্ছে, হ্যাঁ
So
দেখে
yes,
ফেলতে পারতেছি।
activity has made life so much easier, but as you said, it brings a lot of problems with it. And those also need to be addressed.
Yes. That is right. And like you were saying, what are we going to talk about for an hour? It's been more than an hour. And I don't think I even got to talk to you about half of the things that I wanted to ask you. So, in we kind of, if I want, if you can wrap up in 1 minute, like what are the benefits that the ICT sector is is going to have um, in this national budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025? What are the benefits in brief, like if I'm in the IT sector, um, or in the startup industry or something? So just few or one or two.
So of course, first and foremost, what's always talked about the tax exemption.
Tax exemption.
A, you basically reinvest what profit you're making, 100% of it. You can push forward, train up people. B, for a startup perspective, this has a huge valuation gain because from a discount, your free cash flow is higher due to a non-taxability. If it had come in, your valuation would have been cut by 25% on the spot. So spending on IT infrastructure and training. Uh, and then again, in some you talked about, but the indirect tax on laptops has gone down, right? And no one really talks about it, but that's actually happened, which is a huge motivation for people working in ITES sector that you can actually have cheaper laptops for once, right? So that's something a huge motivation for this. And the extension period is not for 1 year; it's actually for longer. So you have a little foresight in terms of how long you can plan your future to move forward on, right? And the drive from the government to push things into a more digital format, I think that allows for connectivity for new tools to be developed that can be more connected. So I think that's a minute. Sorry if it's a little longer.
No, no, no. These are all very great, and that is what we want to say. That when we develop into a particular sector, the government will also want to get something back from that sector. Like আমি তো এটার উপর ইনভেস্ট করছি এই সেক্টরের উপর, তো what is this sector giving back to me? So currently the ICT sector contributes only 1.25% of the national GDP, which we want it to be 50 billion by 2041. So all these things changes need to be made. And another thing, and the potential is there. And just
Absolutely.
আমি একটা কথা বলেই শেষ করব যে the potential is there. Just একটা ছোট্ট একটা example দিয়ে on the cloud services. You said everything is on the cloud, right? Because laptop শুরু হয়ে গেল, if it's on the cloud, it's on the cloud. So the market for cloud services and web hosting in our country is 20 million, but we are only having 10% retained by domestic entrepreneurs. So do you see there's a huge gap? There is a potential. There is potential. We can do this domestically and keep these, these cloud services here in Bangladesh. And again, digital literacy, we need resources, we need to kind of develop our skills. So it's going to go in circle, but I do believe it's going to
And you
happen
need
because
cybersecurity experts, as you said. If you want to have cloud services domestically, you need specialists in that, right?
again, law,
Yeah.
technology, and responsible citizens, smart citizens. So everybody needs to kind of work together in a collaborative way. So I think public private partnership is the way forward. Collaboration is the way forward because our goal is the same. And I also think we need to start believing in the fact that we have to work smart, not hard. If somebody is doing this, let's collaborate and not compete. And of course then in certain areas we will compete, because if there's no competition, you will not have the urge to do better. But I think right now, because of having the same goals, collaboration could be a starting point, and it will make things easier, because তাহলে actually যে financial burdenটা একজনের উপর কম পড়ে। Okay, you have good, you are a good in management, তুমি আমাকে ওই সার্ভিসটা দাও, you're good in providing education, তুমি আমাকে এটা দাও, তুমি আমাকে tech solutionটা দাও, then we merge together instead of having three different companies, we come together. So এভাবে কিন্তু আসলে যেটা বলছিলাম যে employment unemployment বাড়বে না, অ্যাকচুয়ালি নতুন নতুন স্কিলস শিখতে হবে আমাদের, এবং নিউ ওয়েজ অফ নতুন নতুন ডেজিগনেশন অ্যান্ড এমপ্লয়িজ ক্রিয়েট হবে। এখন ডেটা অফিসার, ইনফরমেশন ম্যানেজার, these are the roles that people are looking into after after all this. So
Of
কিছু
course.
চলে যাবে, কিছু চলে যাবে, but there will be new jobs that are created. A lot of people said lawyers will lose their job after artificial intelligence comes and blah blah blah, but not necessarily. But like I said, you have to learn new skills, we have to be adaptive, and we have to be able to go in the same pace, the way the world is changing. And this is a digital transformation which is happening all over the world, and we also have to kind of adjust ourselves with it. So I think we have actually crossed the 1 hour timeline. Thank you so much, Sizan, for your time and your expert advice. I learned a lot. And like I said, I know it is not easy. If you show me the finance budget, that finance bill, I get scared. I'm like, oh my God, somebody else read it to me. So it is a lot of work, and I am really happy and with the way the NVR has done it this time, like with such transparency and openness, which kind of shows that they're willing to take recommendations and improve, and like you said, and if necessary revise also. It's not like written in stone আর চেঞ্জ করা যাবে না. So these are very, I think these are also very positive impacts, which are kind of also kind of is an indication that আমরা in the future হয়তো we will be agile and change as per the need of the economy and the market and the country. So with that, I think I'm gonna thank you once again, and if you have anything to say, we can you can wish the viewers what to watch out for, and when can we expect this.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss, and it's been a very engaging conversation, as you said. I don't know when 1 hour flew by, so thank you for this opportunity. And again, with taxes and budget, what we had discussed, these will evolve. It will change, as you said. It's agile, and we need to be ready for it, and we need to embrace it, right? So, in terms of future, whatever comes our way, we need to be ready for that. And I think with technology as well, it's very important that we adopt early. So AI will not take everyone's jobs away, it'll just create new ones, right? And whoever is good at using that skill, as an accountant, when Excel came out, everyone thought, oh, now accountants are not needed. Excel can do this for you. Has it changed anything? The only thing that's changed, we needed to learn a new skill of using Excel.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then whoever was better at using Excel was a better accountant. So it's a matter of adopting that technology and being good at using it, right? So that, of course, the job will continue to exist, but it'll evolve. That's all. So thank you. Thank you so much, Vice Shelly.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone who stayed back, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye bye.